everyone, my name's Rebecca. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm coming to you with a kind of late October wrap-up. If I look like I'm sitting weird, it's because I am. So I didn't actually read that much in October, especially in ways of books. I read quite a few short stories, novellas, a graphic novel, well a collection of comics. A lot of stuff was going on. I didn't have a great month last month, which was, reflected in my uploads, I think. I didn't upload many videos last month at all. That's just the way of the world sometimes. But this month is already going a little better. So anyway, just jump straight into the wrap up. So the first thing I read in October was a short story of Edgar Allan Poe's called The Masque of the Red Death. So I read this because it was going around online when a lot of people at the White House started getting COVID, and everyone was saying this is like the Masque of the Red Death but real life. And so basically what it's about is the elite of this country have locked themselves away to get away from a plague called the Red Death, and basically you just kind of like leak blood and then explode. It's horrible, but they've totally isolated themselves, so they're just living life as normal while all the poor people catch COVID and they just kind of let them all die. So you can see the parallels already. And then they have this big party and someone they've never seen before appears, and then all of a sudden he starts to bleed and they realise he has the Red Death and they're all going to get infected. I don't know how I would have felt about it if it hadn't been so relevant to something happening now. I definitely would have felt differently about it, as I feel like the same sort of things happening in England as it did in the US with the White House. It's a good story, and it's the first Edgar Allan Poe I've ever read, so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was written really well. It was a really interesting concept, especially looking back on it from present times. And yeah, I would recommend reading it if you can find it. It's really interesting, and I think really reflects how the rich and powerful are treating COVID now. So it was a good book. So I gave that short story 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was Le Chateau de Epstein by Alexandre Dumas. In English, that's The Castle of Epstein. It basically follows the Epsteins, who are nobility in Germany, and it's kind of centered around this like family myth that if an Epstein woman dies on Christmas Eve at midnight, she never truly dies, which basically means she comes back as a ghost. And it's kind of about that, and it's kind of about the Epsteins, and it's kind of about something else. I was reading actually that this started off as a completely different story by another man. I can't remember who it was now. And then Alexandre Dumas changed loads of things, and I think you can tell because the writing's not like his other works that I've read, and I just didn't really know how to feel about it. I was bored for quite a lot of it. I didn't care for any of the characters. It was in places like lovely and beautiful and descriptive, and then in other places it was, you know, it had a flair for the dramatic. It just didn't seem to gel well together, and it was like this big generational saga, but it was in like 100 pages, and I just didn't, it was written really well. It was funny in bits, but I thought a lot of it was boring, and a lot of it was it just wasn't very cohesive. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars though, because I finished it and I enjoyed it enough to finish it. The next book I read, the first full-length novel, was Boypods by Eliza Clark. It's kind of hard to describe this one. It's about this woman who is from Newcastle, so local to me, and it was really nice actually reading it being set in Newcastle, because I haven't read any fiction set in Newcastle before, and it was nice to know where all of the things were that she was talking about. And like, even she mentioned Tesco on Clayton Street, and I used to go there every single day when I was working in the office. I'm working from home at the moment because of COVID, but our office is in the city centre, and I used to go to that Tesco every single day just to get out of the office. They've seen so much of my money, but even just little things like that, it was really nice to read about somewhere that I live. So it's about this woman, and she's a photographer, and she says she photographs men that are like unconventional looking, but really I think the more you read into it, she likes feminine looking men and men that aren't, you know, super handsome. They might have like one thing wrong with them, like their nose is too big, or they might have acne scars or a monobrow or something. Like, it's little things like that in the grand scheme of things doesn't make them ugly. They're still attractive men. I don't really know how to describe it other than that. It's kind of like seeing her mental health deteriorate as well. It's a hard one to review because I just am confused and baffled by the whole thing. To be honest, I didn't really like it. I gave it 3 stars, but sitting on it, I'd probably give it 2 now. It's vulgar where it doesn't need to be. I think a lot of it was just said for the sake of it and because they were Geordie maybe. And but I think the whole thing is confusing. You get to the end, and like, to be fair to Eliza Clark, you get to the end and you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's real and what isn't. She's created this really fantastic, unreliable narrator, and you fall into her like spiraling mental health. You fall into that with her until you get to a place where you realise you don't know what's going on anymore, and you don't know what's real and what's not. It's an interesting experience. I didn't enjoy the book, but I really appreciate the craft of it because I can see where Eliza Clark has created a really interesting and complex character, but it wasn't for me, really, to be honest. The next book I read was Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is a comic collection. So this is the Sarah Anderson that does Sarah Scribbles. I love Sarah Scribbles. They're so relatable. I'll put a picture of my favourite one on the screen where she's like in a bookshop and she just throws money at the cashier. So when I found out she was doing this book, I thought I have to have it, and it is beautiful. It's got black sprayed edges. It's got the vampire on the front. On the back it says, "I want your love," crossed out, and then blood. It's really good, and this is just a collection of comics about a vampire and a werewolf falling in love. Oh my god, it's absolutely perfect. This is so cute. I loved it so much. I just want to read it again immediately. It's so cute. So basically it's just little things like I mean, there's like stuff like that dotted throughout, but also things like this where they're being cute, but like he's burning her with silver, or like little things like that where the dog's being cute, stuff like that. It's so good and it's so cute and it's so funny, and I love this. I highly recommend it. I can't really like review it properly because it's a collection of little snippets, but I love the art style in this, totally different to the Sarah Scribbles stuff. It's just so cute and it's so fun, and I love it, and I recommend everybody read it. The next thing I read is kind of I'm kind of cheating with this one, but it's Greta and Her Giants by Zoe Tucker, and I actually attended a live Durham Book Festival event where Zoe Tucker read this book, and they had the pictures up so you could see what the page is. So did I read this one? Technically no, but it could have been the audiobook, you know. Greta and Her Giants is a kid's book, and it's an introduction to climate change, really. And so the giants are like tearing down the forest and bulldozing people's homes, and the animals don't know what to do and they go to Greta for help. And she goes out with a big sign and she tries to get the giants' attention, but they ignore her. And then every day she inspires other people to go up with their own signs and to shout at the giants as they walk past into the forest. And eventually the giants notice, and they basically learn to live in harmony where the giants can keep doing what they need to do, but they're not destroying the homes of the animals and their habitats and destroying the environment. I would say this book is a very, very good introduction for kids to climate change. It's good at emphasising this is serious but doesn't make it scary for them. It's also a lovely looking book. The colours in it are really good, the way that they use the different colours to distinguish between the giants' city and the forest, and then the way all of it intermingles towards the end when they're all working together. It's a fantastic little book, and at the end there's quite a lot of resources for how to get involved in campaigning for climate justice, and it's like further reading and stuff. It's a really, really good book, I think, and a really good introduction for any kids that are interested in climate change, or that you want to teach about climate change but you're not sure how. I think this is a really good introduction to all of that. I ended up giving that 5 out of 5 stars because I thought it was really, really good. The next book that I read in October was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I'm not going to touch on a lot of the controversies and stuff around this here because I just don't think I have enough time. I am planning on doing a full review of this, so I will link that below in the description when that's up. I thought this book was okay in terms of the controversial stuff, but a lot of it was bad examples. I think that was mostly it. A lot of the stuff that's been pulled out and is being shared in isolation, in the wider context, it's like, actually there's a reason for it, but it's just a bad example. Or there's some things that people have said, what is this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then someone from that minority has said, actually, that's not offensive, it's normal. So I recommend going out and reading reviews from both sides, because there's a few now on both sides of the conversation that really speak about all of that stuff more than I ever can. But in terms of the actual book, it has first book in a fantasy series syndrome, which isn't great when there's only 2 books in the series, as far as I know. The vast majority of this book is world building, but the way that Naomi Novik builds this world, and it's a shame because she hasn't done this yet with her other books that I've read, it's a lot of info dumping. It's an interesting world, and the school itself's very interesting, and I'd like to know a little bit more about it, but just because the whole of this book, basically until the last part where they go on like a little bit of an adventure, is just world building. It's info dump. It's like there's no break in it for you to get any kind of real like action. And because of who Elle is and how she is, and the fact that she doesn't really socialize with anyone for the first sort of half, 2/3 of the book, you don't really like, we don't get a lot of other characters, we don't get to know anybody else, so it's just Elle and world building and that's it. But once it starts to get going, it's really good, and I am looking forward to the second book in this series, because I think now that everything's established and she's built some relationships, so we're starting to get to know some of the other characters, I think it'll be really interesting to see actually what this flourishes into, because I do really believe that it has potential. But this book, like, if you do want to read this, just know going into it, it is a lot of world building. So if you like that sort of thing, great, but if you like it dotted with action, you might be disappointed. A lot of the action in this happens to the side, where Orion's fighting stuff and Elle's focusing on something else, or it's to teach you about some of the Maleficers. So yeah, I thought it was just okay, but I do think it has potential, and I do think now that everything's established, the second book is going to be good. The second to last thing that I read, I actually DNF'd, and that is The Adventures of Maud West by Susanna Stapleton. Contrary to the name of the book, it's not about Maud West really. So this is a non-fiction. I thought it was going to be about Maud West. It all implies it's going to be about Maud West, but to be honest, she's more of a touchstone for Susanna Stapleton to talk about other stuff. So a lot of it is about her research, about things she found out about the early 20th century when Maud West was working as a detective. And there's not a whole lot about Maud at all. I would say I got about halfway through the book, and I would say maybe a quarter of that the half that I read was about Maud West, and the rest of it was just kind of about literally anything else. Even to the point where she's talking about things she's reading on the train at the British Library. Like, I don't care. I mean, that sounds awful, but I want to hear about Maud West. Like, yeah, it was interesting to hear about some of her research techniques because I wouldn't have thought of any of that, but that's not what I picked the book up for. And so ultimately I was just disappointed and I decided to put it down. The last book I read in October was actually lent to me by someone that my boyfriend works with, and that is The Butchering Art by Lindsay Fitzharris. It's about Joseph Lister. If you know who Joseph Lister is, then same. I actually did before I started reading this, but he's basically one of the fathers of modern medicine. He kind of invented antiseptic use in hospitals. So he kind of was a pioneer of hospitals being clean and surgery tools being clean, people washing their hands, mopping the floors, getting rid of all the blood on the tables. That was Joseph Lister. It's a really interesting book. And it's very much about Joseph Lister's life, but also a little about the history of just surgery. So it touches on some of the old practices, but also how it changed during Joseph Lister's lifetime and how he changed it and how he influenced it. And also about how much pushback there was when he was saying, you know, we should really clean the wound, or we should clean our instruments, or we should wash our hands. Everyone was like, what the hell? It was like, you know, you should have the window shut, and you know, things that to us seem crazy to even suggest. It's like, obviously surgery should be clean. And Joseph Lister didn't go so far as to say it should be sterile the way it is now, but he did think that, you know, you should clean wounds and stuff, which was apparently a controversial issue back then. Overall, really interesting book. I kind of find it hard to review non-fiction because it's, you know, this is about someone's life and it's just about history, but I do think it was well written. There is a little bit of jargon in it in terms of chemistry that I maybe would have been confused about had I not studied chemistry at a bit of a higher level. So that's the only warning I would give people, is, you know, you might have to Google a few things, but like in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that's an issue. A lot of it was really approachable. It was in a really good amount of detail. It was interesting. She dotted, you know, specific patient stories and stuff throughout that I thought was really good. Yeah, that was my October wrap up. For me, wasn't a great month. I didn't read for a lot of it. I think I spent quite a lot of time just doing anything other than reading. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this month. And I, to be honest, for the most part, enjoyed a lot of the books that I read. So semi-successful, I think. Let me know if you've read any of these books down below. If you've read A Deadly Education, I know that there's a lot of opinions on that still, so I'd be interested to hear yours, especially because I do want to do a full review on it because I have quite a lot of thoughts that just don't fit into a wrap up. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Feel free to give this video a like, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.